She watches the feed alone in her small kitchen. The room is gray with morning light. Outside, the city hums. Inside, the screen fills the room. A man in a silver uniform stands on a high stage. He smiles like a man who owns the day. People clap. In the background, his voice is steady, like a promise. He speaks of progress. The live chat scrolls with praise. For 1 second, his face is gone. The stage is there. The lights are there. But where his face should be, the pixels are blank, white as paper. Viewers laugh at first. Someone calls it a streaming glitch. The chat fills with jokes. She does not laugh. Her hands do not shake, but her breath shortens. Years ago they erased her brother from the archives. His face had once been pulled from a public photo, and a name crossed out in a list. The silence that followed had cost them a life. The blank on the screen brings that silence back. The clip spreads fast. Friends send it with stunned messages. Did you see? Is it real? People across the city watch the second the face vanishes. Some replay it slowly. Each replay shows the blank, like a cut in time. The blank is too clean to be a normal error. It looks like an absence placed on purpose. She plugs a small dented drive into her laptop. Inside is one file and one line of code. The code reads like a poem to those who know machine speech. To others it is garbage. To her it is the shape of a blank. She remembers long nights learning to hide traces. She learned to make a hole in a video without breaking the machine. A blank can stop a story. A blank can force a question. She thinks of the man on the stage and the empire that writes history. Outside, the city moves. Officials issue a short statement. The broadcast was interrupted by a technical error. The empire promises an investigation. The official feed shows the speech again and claims there was only a pause. Many accept that answer. Many do not. From her window she sees the main square. Screens there repeat the speech. The blank appears on many faces in a row. A child points and asks his mother why the man's face is broken. A man drops his drink. The blank lands like a stone in the water. Ripples move outward. The Empire sends a team to trace the attack. Their lights move across a digital map like comets. An old substation, decommissioned years ago, shows up as a lead. No modern broadcast should touch an old powerhouse. She smiles, without joy, when she hears the name. She had walked past it once, and felt the smell of rust and rain. It is a place that keeps old things. The clip brings out voices that were quiet. A teacher posts about a student who no longer appears in the yearbook. A mother posts a family photo with a missing face. People find small blanks in their lives. The idea that history can be edited makes them angry and afraid. That night, she answers an email from a former broadcast tech named Rafi. He writes in short messages, "I know how to open old nodes. They were never meant to erase faces, only clean noise. But codes learn new uses." He sends a photo of an old control room and a note, "Meet me at the substation." They meet in the dark. Metal tastes like rain. The node hums like a small animal. Rafi shows how a single packet can touch many streams. He shows her how a line of code can remove a single frame and leave the rest of the video whole. They test on an unused tape. The face drops out in a single beat. The room is silent. They laugh in a small, sharp way. They also feel fear. The Empire will dig deeper. The blank will bring more questions and more danger. Some people may lose more than their place in a photo. Small things could start to slip from memory when many blanks appear. They did not mean harm when they began. Now they see cost. She hides the drive in its sleeve and closes her hand around it. The feed spreads. The city does not sleep. People clip the blank and ask who decides what is seen. The blank is not empty now. It holds weight. She steps back from the window and turns the laptop screen away. She closes her eyes and remembers her brother's face, the one officials had taken. She holds it like a secret. The city watches the clip again. The world waits. They meet at night when the rain has stopped, and the city smells like metal. The substation sits under a loose moon. Broken signs hang from the fence. She slips through a gap and finds the heavy door that Raffi said would not lock. He is already inside, a small shape against the machines. He wears an old jacket and carries a flashlight that trembles a little. The room is full of old wires and dusty panels. The air is cold. A single node glows in the dark, a small square of blue that seems out of place. Raffi moves like someone who has been here before. He runs his hand along the metal and listens. He speaks in short lines. He says, "This place remembers everything. It keeps small paths alive. No one uses it now, but the paths still sleep." She watches him work. He opens a battered case and pulls out tools. He shows her wires with names that mean nothing to most people. To him, the names are like maps. He taps a line on a terminal, and a window opens with code that looks like a poem. The code does not shout, it whispers. He calls the small packet a whiteout. He says it moves through old paths fast. It can touch many feeds in one breath. They test it on an old tape. The tape is a recording of a market long closed. A woman sells fruit. A child runs. Raffi points at the screen and types a short command. The woman's face drops away for one beat. The sound continues. The child laughs, but the face is gone. The tape plays on as if nothing happened. They both hear the wrongness in that silence. Why would they do this? She asks. The question is soft. She thinks of the files where her brother's name had been struck out. She thinks of the letters that said he never existed. Raffi answers without looking up. Control. Stories make power. Break the story, and you break the control. He explains it slowly. Old systems accept small messages that newer systems ignore. The old node can speak to many streams at once. A carefully placed packet can mark a frame as empty. Machines follow the mark like a rule. They do not ask why. They simply obey. She learns how precise the whiteout must be. Too big a change in modern filters will catch it. Too small, and it will not be seen by enough people. They shape the command like a knife. They practice until the blank feels clean. The code will not damage the data. It only removes the face for a frame. The rest of the video remains. That is what makes the cut so cruel. It leaves everything and takes one thing. The world keeps moving while a piece of truth falls away. Raffi warns her too. He says, people will not believe a blank right away. They will accept a glitch. But if you place many blanks in important places, people begin to ask questions. Doubt spreads faster than any broadcast. He looks at her then, and she sees the tiredness under his eyes. But this work invites danger, he says. Cameras talk. Networks talk. Someone watches who can trace signals back. Old nodes, leak paths. You must hide where you can. They speak of meaning. She remembers the small holes she found in family albums. She remembers teachers who could not place a student's name in old lists. People post images of missing faces and ask for answers. The blanks become a new way to speak. Where a protest once needed numbers, now a single frame with an empty face can make many people stop thinking what they were told. Newsrooms pick up the original clip. People argue late into the night. Some call it art, some call it sabotage. The Empire sends technicians to scan the grid. Their scanners crawl like long fingers through the city's veins. Raffi watches the public chatter and shakes his head. They will patch the holes in software and watch the old paths with stronger eyes, he says. They will chase the packets. That is the rule. They plan small moves. Raffi names potential targets, courtroom feeds, archive reels, estate, memorial tape. Each place will change the story in a way that cannot be explained away. She thinks of her brother's face in those dusty files. She thinks of a judge's voice that once said a sentence no one can now prove. They draw maps on paper with a pencil. The lines are shaky, but clear. They will not strike many times. They will make each blank matter. Outside, someone watches them, or so the alarms eventually say. At first it is a soft ping that Raffi blames on a bad node. Then the console lights up with small green marks. A drone signal flares across a map on his screen. The drone's path moves like a small bright bird above the city. Raffi's fingers pause. He pulls up a trace. Old nodes show their addresses like names in a book. Each address has a number. The number is small and stubborn. It moves along a chain of routers and lands on a single MAC, a machine code tied to a device. The device sits not in a safe lab, but on the edge of the substation. Raffi curses softly. He did not expect anyone to reach so far so fast. Someone is close, he says. They followed a packet back. Not many can do this. Not easy. They dug through old map traces and matched a signature. He looks at her with fear she has not felt before. They know this node. She swallows. The rain begins again outside, fine and cold. The small hum of the node feels louder. Her hands tighten around the drive in her pocket. The city, she realizes, is a body. It breathes. It listens. The whiteouts are small knives. They can cut a lie wide open. But knives also leave trails. Can we move? She asks. Raffi shakes his head. The node is heavy and tied to the old grid. They cannot take it with them. They can only close the door and hide what they have done. He begins to erase logs, to cover their steps as best he can. She watches him, work, and thinks of the boy at the rally who asked her name and then forgot it. She thinks of the cost. They leave the substation through the same gap in the fence. The street smells of wet metal. Above, a drone turns like a watchful eye and fades into cloud. Her phone buzzes with messages. Someone posted a new picture, a family photo with a face missing. Comments pour in. The world is restless now. When they part in a quiet alley, Raffi presses a hand to her arm. We are not the only ones who can make blanks, he warns. And we are not the only ones who will use them. She nods and walks away into the rain. Behind her, the substation sits in the dark and hums. The city sleeps badly, and the network keeps a small, bright list of names. They moved like ghosts. The city still buzzed from the first whiteout, but tonight the group wanted more than a ripple. They wanted a wound that would not heal on its own. They chose a courtroom feed, a public hearing about land and laws, judges, clerks, cameras. If a sentence vanished there, it would not be a joke or a glitch. It would be a question that kept coming back. The plan was tight. Raffi set the node to send the packet at a single beat. The code would touch the courtroom streams in 3 districts at once. The command had to be exact. They watched the broadcast from a small room above a shuttered shop. The news editor, Lila, sat with her chin in her hand. She had lost a brother to the same erasure. Now she used her office like a small war room. A teacher named Omar kept his eyes on the live chat. He had found his student's name missing from a school roll. 2 others checked lines and logs. The room smelled of old coffee and fear. On screen, the judge read the sentence. The lawyers shuffled papers. A woman in the front row cried quietly. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the judge's mouth moved, and the words were gone. The sentence cut out in the recording. The rest of the hearing played on as if nothing had happened. People on the live chat wrote that the audio had a hole. Others said the caption showed different words. Confusion spread. Across the city, same feeds showed the same blank. Screens in cafes and transit hubs replayed the strange cut. People argued. In comment threads. Some said it was a trick. Some said it proved the first whiteout was not an accident. Lila pushed a live alert. The newsroom splintered between fear and duty. They could not ignore a hole in the law. The Empire answered fast. Their tech department released an update that added a bright badge to any clip their systems thought was altered. The badge read, tampered, untrusted. It flashed red on screens and mobile apps. The Empire told people the badge meant the clip was unsafe and must be ignored. They urged citizens to trust official releases only. At first, many did. The badge looked official. It made people feel safe. But the badge also made more people look. Why would the state mark its own feeds? Why would it erase a judge's sentence and then label the result as fake? The badge made doubt louder. The resistance used the badge against the Empire. Leela printed copies of the courtroom feed. She put the pressed frames on walls in public squares. People came to look. They pointed at the place where the words had vanished. A young man shouted that the law had been stolen. A woman wrapped the printed frames in plastic to protect them from rain. Copies of the clips moved like contraband from hand to hand. Omar went to his school. He held a meeting with parents and teachers. He showed them a list where a child's name had been missing. In official lists. He asked the parents to check at home. Families brought books and papers. They compared what they remembered to what the state said. The blanks in government files began to match blanks in living rooms. Stories became contested. The Empire did more than label clips. They sent investigators and arrests. Cameras were taken down in a dozen neighborhoods. An archive worker who had offered to help people view old tapes was detained for questioning. The city felt heavier. Soldiers checked IDs by the metro. People whispered in doorways. The group grew careful. They split jobs. Lila and 2 reporters worked the public side. Omar organized teachers and parents. Rafi kept the tech tight and small. The protagonist sat with the drive inside her jacket. She learned to listen for the silence that meant danger. She watched friends change from hope to worry as the cost of action rose. They planned a broadcast that could not be shrugged off by a tamper badge. They would open a raw feed from the state's central archive. Not a trimmed story, but the raw files, logs, names, full hearings, old photographs. If the archive played live for an hour, people could watch the chain of edits. They could see what had been removed. A badge could not stop the truth if it played in every home at once. Rafi found a window in the network timing. He explained it. Clearly, there is a 1-hour gap at dawn. Backups roll over. For 60 minutes, mirrors speak with less control. If we can open that gap, the archive will stream raw for anyone who connects. He set the plan like a clock. Lila arranged channels. Omar warned the communities. The city became a net of small fires. Night before the broadcast, the city held its breath. The protagonist lay awake and thought of her brother. She thought of the judge's missing words and of the teacher's lost names. She thought of all, the small blanks pinned on walls like needles. She felt both fear and a fierce need. At dawn, streaming links went up. People tuned in from phones, from old radios adapted to receive feeds, from radios built in basements. The hour began with a slow roll of files. A dozen judges, a stack of lists, 100 photographs. Screen by screen, people watched. Then, in the middle of the raw stream, a wall of static swallowed the feed. For a heartbeat, it was only noise. Viewers cursed. Links died. The live chat filled with panic. Then a single frame flashed. A tired face looking straight into the camera. It was her brother. The image hung for less than a second. It burned like a match. People froze. The feed collapsed again into static. The hour did not finish. Panic spread, then grief, then anger. The link had shown proof and taken it away like a tease. In the small room above the shop, Lila's hand covered her mouth. Omar's knees buckled. Rafi's fingers slammed the table. The protagonist felt something go cold behind her eyes. The city had seen a face it was told to forget, and then the image had been yanked back into silence. Someone had reached into the raw stream and cut the frame. Whoever did it had sight and power. They had also sent a message. You will not finish your reveal unpunished. Outside, sirens rose. On screens, The tamper badge flashed red once more. The group looked at each other and knew the truth. Their plan had worked in part. The world had seen proof, but the cut had a cost. The archive was guarded by hands faster and crueler than they had guessed. The hunt would come. They came in the morning like a slow wave. First a few people at the archive gates, then more. By noon, the steps were crowded with faces and paper in their hands. People held prints of frames where something was missing. They wiped rain from photographs and pressed them to glass. They wanted to see the raw reels. They wanted proof. The protagonist watched from a street corner. She kept her coat buttoned tight. Her pockets held a small drive and a folded note from Raffi. The city smelled of wet pavement and bread from a cart nearby. People around her argued quietly. Some said the empire must be punished. Others said violence would come. Children tugged at parents' sleeves and asked questions they could not yet say properly. Inside the archives, librarians huddled by locked doors. They had worked with those files for years. To them, the reels were not just tape. They were names. They were lists. They remembered when officials changed a line and no one noticed. The crowd demanded the locks be opened. Someone in the front held a photo up high that had a clean white hole where a face had been. A woman cried and said, "This is my brother." A man shouted that the law had been stolen. The empire answered, like every empire does when it fears. The story is slipping. Soldiers with dark coats moved through the streets. They blocked access to some archives and left others open as a trick. They announced emergency orders and said the crowd was illegal. News feeds showed official statements on a loop. The state called the whiteouts a dangerous new weapon used by criminals. They said people should trust only verified sources. A few anchors read the lines with steady voices as if the words could bind the city back together. But the picture of her brother had already cut something open. People could not look away. Small groups gathered in living rooms and bars. They compared photos. An old man at a tea stall said the empire had removed his name from a war memorial. A teacher at a school meeting said a student did not exist in the roll call. The blanks were no longer only in machines. They were in lives. Something else appeared as the blanks grew. It started small. A woman in a market could not recall the color of a dress she loved. She knew she loved it, but the color would not come to mind for a day. A father could not remember a date his son had been born for an afternoon. People laughed and called it tiredness at first. Then a mother could not remember her son's face for 1 hour after she watched a dozen whiteouts online. She screamed. The story that took things away had begun to touch memory itself. The group worried. They had meant to take proof, not people's names. Raffi ran tests late into the night. He said the packets did not rewrite brains. They touched records. They made machines show blanks. But the city's answer was not only digital. When enough official proofs disappeared at once, people started to question what they held inside. Doubt moved fast, then fear, and fear sometimes came with a cost. The protagonist thought of her brother. She thought of his face on that single frame. It had meant everything to 1,000 strangers for 1 second. Those strangers had felt grief and anger. They had also felt the risk. She watched a woman who had been at the archive leave with shaking hands and an empty space where a name once fit. She watched a man speak the name of his father and then frown because the sound did not settle. The city was changing under their feet. Arrests came. Quiet men in plain clothes visited people who had posted pictures of missing faces. An archive assistant who had shown a tape to a neighbor was taken at dawn. A journalist who tweeted a frame had his apartment searched. The empire did not show the reason. It said only that the law must be protected. At night, the protagonist met with Lila and Omar in a small room above the shuttered shop. The room smelled of dust and strong tea. They fed each other facts, like small fires. Lila had copies of messages from a reporter who said the state would tighten controls over the backups. Omar had lists of parents who promised to check home books for missing names. They argued about the next step. "We can keep striking," Leela said. "We can make more blanks. We can force people to look and to question." "But the memory loss is growing," Omar replied. "I heard from 3 parents today. One child forgot his teacher's name for hours. Another parent forgot the color of a picture in their home. This is not just media anymore. It touches people." Rafi rubbed his face and looked away. "We never wanted to break minds," he said. "We wanted to break lies. The tech can do damage if used wrong. The city is a system. When you cut the system, sometimes other parts fail." The protagonist kept quiet. She thought of the boy from the protest who had watched the raw stream. He had stood near the front when the face flashed for that single second. His eyes had widened like the rest. She had put a hand on his shoulder without thinking. He had looked at her and asked her name. She had said it. He had smiled. Later he told someone he would always remember her. The thought had warmed her. Now the warmth felt thin. They chose to act carefully. They would not flood the network. They would open things people needed to know, slowly. They would push for legal pressure and proof in the open, not only blanks. They would copy tapes and give them to libraries. They would ask journalists to print frames and to name names. Lila said, a plan to scatter proof in places the empire could not easily close. Omar organized teachers to collect paper records. Rafi worked to make the blanks less harmful, to target only the machines that made erasure automatic. They worked through the night. At dawn, the city felt raw and tired. People moved like sleepwalkers through streets that felt both familiar and new. The protagonist walked to a small square where families met to trade prints. She watched a child show his grandfather a photo with a white hole in the middle. The grandfather stroked his chin and pointed to the blank. "Who is missing?" he asked. The boy beside her watched the prince with bright eyes. He had a freckle on his cheek and a coat 2 sizes too large. She had forgotten his name sometimes, but she knew his face. She stepped closer and smiled. He looked up and smiled back. "Who are you?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. He meant the question like a child. She opened her mouth to answer with the name she had said before. He frowned and shook his head, like a computer trying to recall a file it could not find. "I'm sorry," he said. I don't know your name." Her fingers went cold. Around them, the crowd hummed with talk. A man shouted something about files. A woman cried quietly. The protagonist held a print to her chest and felt like the paper might fall away. She thought of all the blanks they had made, all the faces that had disappeared from screens. She felt the cost press in. She did not speak. She only watched the boy, and she realized the fight had become larger than proof. It had begun to shape what people could hold in their hearts. The city had learned to look. Now it might also learn to forget. They named the plan the last frame. It sounded small and cruel and perfect. The city had seen blanks and had felt their cost. Now the resistance wanted to open the vaults for 1 hour. 1 hour of raw files. 1 hour when no badge could claim a clip was tampered. 1 hour of truth. Rafi explained it slowly. The archive used a central protocol to lock files across the system. The protocol trusted a single identity to authorize mass access. That identity was tied to a record stamped into many systems. If that record vanished cleanly, the vaults would roll open for a brief window. The catch was terrible. Whoever erased the record would erase themselves from public memory in most systems. Names, photos, credits, many would shift into blanks. People close to them might not remember. The city could see every erased thing, but the eraser would become a blank in the lives they saved. She listened and thought of her brother. She thought of the boy who had forgotten her name for a moment. She thought of the mother who could not recall her son's face after too many ways. The cost landed like a weight. She did not ask who would do it. She already knew. They moved fast. Lila printed steps and passed them out. Omar organized watch groups to protect the feeds during the hour. Rafi built the packet that would trigger the protocol once a signature vanished. They practiced in empty rooms and on old tapes. Each person had a role. Each role mattered. On the day, the city walked heavy. Officials tightened controls and spoke of law. People still gathered at squares and libraries. Some clutched printed frames with holes. The protagonist wore a coat that did not belong to her. She kept the small drive in an inner pocket. Her hands were steady. Her heart moved slow and sure. They met in the basement of an old theater. The air smelled of dust and stage lights. Wires ran like roots along the floor. Rafi called the network to a single point. Leela fed the streaming channels. Omar kept a line to teachers and families. The protagonist sat at the console and breathed once. "This will remove you from many systems," Rafi said. "It will cut your name from the index. It will make you a blank in places that matter. People who remember you only by a state file may lose that memory." She nodded. "Then let them find me in other ways," she said. Her voice did not shake. Rafi hesitated and then touched her hand. He did not want this for her, but he knew she had chosen. She had already chosen long ago, when she put a blank where her brother had been. She closed her eyes and thought of the face that had been taken before. She thought of the river of small erasures they had started to stop at the appointed minute. The console hummed. The city held its breath in many rooms. Links lit up across maps. Phones buzzed. Old radios clicked on. The hour began quiet and then rushed like a tide. Files streamed from the vault. Names scrolled. Old hearings played. Photos rolled across screens. People watched in living rooms, in packed squares, in packed trains. Proof unrolled like a long ribbon. Tears began in many eyes. Halfway through, the console asked for a signature. The protocol reached for the name the resistance had prepared to erase. The protagonist placed her finger on the scanner and watched the light go green. She typed the final command. For a single second, the console showed her face in a small box. Then it went white. Her own recorded presence fell away from the archive like a sheet pulled from a table. The vault opened wider. Files that had been hidden for years poured out. Judges' notes, service records, old memos that carried names and signatures, all streamed into public view. People saw the evidence of lies and edits. The city murmured, then rose with sound that felt like a breaking. The Empire tried to stop it. Men in dark coats reached for network hubs. Servers were unplugged and then rebooted. The state pushed updates that tried to restamp the vaults. But for that hour, the city had a truth that could not be erased. Viewers copied, printed, and saved. Screens filled with names that had been missing for decades. Proof moved from screen to hand. The tamper badges blinked uselessly at the flood of raw files. When the hour closed, the vault sealed itself like a mouth. The stream stopped. People held breath and then let out a sound that was both sorrow and victory. The Empire's spokespeople tried to spin the loss. Many of the state's officials lost power as more citizens demanded truth. Courts reopened cases. Archives were examined in public. The story the Empire had told unraveled. In the days after, new leaders spoke of reform. Old documents were placed in public rooms. Record clerks were given protection. Families found names they had lost. People who had been erased began to appear in lists and in the mouths of those who had remembered without files. At home, small panes showed the price of the last frame. Her sister sat at a kitchen table and looked at a family album. She touched a page where a woman had once smiled back. The sister frowned and could not read the caption. Friends described a brave woman with quick hands and a careful voice. They remembered gestures. They remembered a laugh like a light in the dark. But when the sister tried to say the name she had once said every morning, the word slid away. It had become a blank dot. The boy from the square came to the archive with a pack of printed frames. He ran to the place where people met to share stories. He pointed to a photograph of a crowd and asked aloud, "Who was the woman in the white coat?" A dozen people looked. Some spoke with soft certainty, others shrugged. The answers came like small rivers. A woman who kept a secret, a stranger who did what needed to be done, a friend who would not be named. They told the boy a story. The story was good and true. It carried how she had stood at a console and broken an empire's hold on truth. The story did not have her name in many mouths. It had other things instead. The way she pressed a key, the way she smiled at a child, the way she put a worn drive into a pocket. The boy listened and kept the story like a seed. Years later, children pointed at a faded print and asked, "Who is she?" Adults told them the story. Names changed with tongues. The woman's picture sat at the edge of a display with a small blank where a caption should be. People did not have a single name to give. They gave instead the truth she had given them, a time when one blank became a revolution.